The last silver dollar sat cold against Caleb Thorne's palm, hidden deep in the worn leather of his boot. It had been there for 3 days now, through dust storms and dry creek beds, through nights when his stomach cramped from hunger and mornings when the sun rose on nothing but more emptiness ahead. Dust Creek appeared like a mirage at first, just another shimmer in the October heat. But the weathered buildings solidified as he drew closer, their sun-bleached boards groaning in the desert wind. The town wasn't much a main street wide enough for 2 wagons to pass, a handful of storefronts with peeling paint, and at the far end, a saloon that promised the only warmth worth finding. Caleb's boots scraped against the plank sidewalk. Each step sent small clouds of dust into the air. His uniform jacket, what was left of it, hung loose on his frame. The blue had faded to gray, the brass buttons long since traded for food or passage. Only the shape remained, marking him as what he'd been, a soldier in a war that ended 5 years ago but still lived in his bones. The saloon door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, oil lamps cast yellow pools of light through tobacco smoke thick enough to cut. The smell hit him first whiskey, sweat, and something else. Fear, maybe, or desperation. He'd learned to recognize both during the war. Men lined the bar, their backs to him. Others sat at tables, cards forgotten in their hands. All of them faced the same direction toward the far corner where a small crowd had gathered. Their silence was wrong. Saloons weren't meant for quiet. Caleb moved along the wall, keeping to the shadows. His hand found the dollar in his boot again. An old habit, $1, enough for a meal, maybe, or half a bottle of whiskey to help him forget, or passage on the next stage heading nowhere in particular. Then he saw her. She stood in the center of the crowd, hands bound in front of her with rough rope. An Apache woman, young but not a child. Her dress, once white deerskin, was torn and stained with trail dust. Her black hair, which should have been long and free, had been hacked short, a deliberate humiliation. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Dark as midnight, they held no plea for mercy, no tears, just a fierce, burning defiance that reminded him of a hawk he'd once seen, trapped but unbroken, daring anyone to come close enough to feel its talons. $50, a voice called out. The speaker was a fat man in a silk vest, his pocket watch chain glinting in the lamplight. Good stock, young, strong, can work a house or a field. The auctioneer, because that's what this was. Caleb realized, with a sick twist in his gut, stood beside her, tall and lean, with a kind of smile that never reached his eyes. His name was Harlan Pike, though Caleb wouldn't learn that until later. For now, he was just another vulture picking at bones. "Come now, gentlemen," Pike said, his voice smooth as snake oil. "Surely she's worth more than 50. Captured fair and square after her band attacked a supply wagon. The loss of good men demands compensation." A lie, most likely. Caleb had seen enough to know how these stories got twisted. A peaceful camp becomes a war party. Women gathering roots become raiders. Children become threats. The truth got buried deeper than the dead. 60. Another man offered. This one wore the remnants of a Confederate uniform, the gray fabric patched and repatched. His eyes held the same hollow look Caleb saw in his own reflection, a man who'd lost his war and didn't know how to stop fighting. The woman's chin lifted slightly. Her gaze swept the room, pausing on each face as if memorizing them. When her eyes found Caleb's, something passed between them, not recognition, but understanding. She saw what he was, another person standing at the edge of an abyss, 1 foot already over. $70, the fat man countered, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. Caleb's hand closed around the dollar. $1 against 70. It was laughable, insulting, even, but his feet moved anyway, carrying him forward through the crowd until he stood in the circle of lamplight. "I'll buy her." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. Faces turned toward him, amused, contemptuous, curious. Pike's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "Well, now," the auctioneer drawled. "A new bidder. And what's your offer, friend?" Caleb reached into his boot, pulled out the silver dollar, and set it on the nearest table. The coin spun once before settling, its eagle side up. In the lamplight, it looked almost new, though he'd carried it through mud and blood and miles beyond counting. The laughter started low, building until it filled the saloon. Men slapped their knees, spilled their drinks, pointed at him like he was the evening's entertainment. The fat man's face turned red as he wheezed with mirth. $1, Pike managed between chuckles. "You're offering $1. Caleb didn't smile, didn't flinch, just stood there, straight-backed despite his weariness, meeting Pike's gaze with the flat stare of a man who'd seen too much to be moved by mockery. "It's what I have," he said simply. The laughter died as quickly as it had come. Something in his voice, perhaps, or the way his hand rested near his hip, where a gun should have been but wasn't. He'd traded that, too, somewhere back in Kansas. But they didn't know that. Pike's eyes narrowed, calculating. "This isn't a charity, friend. The lady's worth considerably more than your generous offer." "Maybe," Caleb said. "But you're not selling a lady, you're selling a person. And where I come from, that's worth exactly nothing." A muscle twitched in Pike's jaw. The crowd shifted, restless. Some of them had fought for the Union, some for the Confederacy. But here, in this nowhere town at the edge of the desert, those old lines blurred. What mattered was profit, survival, and not stirring up trouble that might bring the army sniffing around. The woman watched it all with those dark eyes, missing nothing. Her bound hands remained still, but Caleb caught the slight shift of her weight, the way she positioned herself to run if the chance came. Smart, survivor's instinct. "Tell you what," Pike said, his smile sharp as broken glass. "Since you're so concerned about the lady's welfare, how about we make it interesting? $1 in a fight. You win. She's yours. You lose." He shrugged. "Well, let's hope you don't lose." The crowd perked up. Nothing like the promise of blood to liven up a dull evening. Money changed hands as men placed bets, most of them against the raggedy stranger with $1 to his name. Caleb glanced at the woman. For the first time, something flickered in her expression, not hope exactly, but possibility, like a door cracking open in a locked room. "No fight," Caleb said. Disappointment rippled through the crowd. Pike's smile faltered. "What's that now?" "No fight," Caleb repeated. He picked up the silver dollar, held it up so the light caught its surface. "This is my offer. Take it or don't. But I won't dance for your amusement." The saloon held its breath. In the corner, someone's hand drifted toward a hidden weapon. The tension stretched tight as wire, ready to snap with the slightest provocation. Then the woman spoke. Her voice was low, accented, but clear. "I am not property." 3 words, spoken with quiet dignity. They landed harder than any fist could have. Pike's face darkened. His hand moved toward the whip coiled at his belt, a stupid move in a room full of armed men with mixed loyalties and short tempers. But anger made men stupid, and Pike was angrier than most. Caleb stepped between them. Not threatening, just there, a wall of faded blue fabric and stubborn will. "The dollar stands," he said, "yes or no?" For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the fat man in the silk vest cleared his throat. "For God's sake, Pike, take the money and be done with it. We've got drinking to do." Others murmured agreement. The Confederate soldier spat tobacco juice into a brass spittoon. "Ain't worth the trouble for one Apache woman. Plenty more where she came from." Pike's jaw worked like he was chewing nails. But he was a businessman above all else. And even bad business was better than no business, especially when the crowd was turning. "Fine," he spat. $1 it is. She's your problem now." He snatched the coin from Caleb's hand, bit it to check its worth, then shoved the woman forward. She stumbled, but didn't fall, catching herself with the grace of someone used to rough handling. Caleb caught her elbow, steadying her. The rope around her wrists was new hemp, tied with a teamster's knot. He'd need a knife to cut it, and his had gone the way of his gun. "Anyone got a blade?" he asked the room. Silence greeted him. Then, surprisingly, the Confederate soldier stood. He pulled a folding knife from his pocket, tossed it over. The bone handle was worn smooth from use. "Keep it," the soldier said. "Any man who'd spend his last dollar on principle probably needs it more than me." Caleb nodded his thanks. Cut the rope with 2 quick slices. The woman rubbed her wrists, red marks showing where the hemp had bitten deep. She looked at him then, really looked, as if trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "We should go," he said quietly. She nodded once, together. They walked toward the door, the crowd parting before them. Caleb could feel the weight of their stares, the unspoken questions, the bets being settled. At the threshold, Pike's voice stopped them. "She runs. I'll find her. That's a promise." Caleb turned back. In the lamplight, Pike looked like what he was, a small man trying to seem large, a scavenger feeding on misery. "She's free to run." Caleb said, "Free to stay, free to choose. That's what a dollar buys in my book." He pushed through the crooked door into the night, the woman beside him. The desert air tasted clean after the saloon stench. Stars spread overhead like spilled salt. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. They stood there for a moment, 2 strangers bound by nothing but a silver dollar and a moment of defiance. The woman looked east, toward the mountains where her people might be. Then west, toward California and the ocean she'd probably never see. "I don't want your protection," she said finally. "Good, I'm not offering it." "Then why?" Caleb thought about it, watching his breath cloud in the cooling air. Why had he spent his last dollar on a stranger's freedom? The answer was too large for words, wrapped up in battlefields and burning homes. In orders followed and regrets carried. "Because I could," he said at last. It wasn't enough of an answer, but it was all he had. The woman studied him with those hawk's eyes, then nodded as if it made sense in a senseless world. "I am Nayeli," she said. "Caleb Thorne." Names exchanged. They started walking, not together exactly, but in the same direction away from Dust Creek and its crude judgments, toward whatever waited in the darkness beyond. Neither spoke of destinations or plans. For now, it was enough to be moving, to be choosing their own steps. Behind them, the saloon's windows glowed like eyes in the night. Ahead, the desert stretched endless and unforgiving. But between them, something had shifted. Not trust that would take time, if it came at all, but possibility. The last dollar was spent, the first choice was made, and in the vast silence of the desert night, 2 people walked free. They walked in silence until Dust Creek became just another shadow against the horizon. The moon climbed higher, turning the desert silver and black, painting their footsteps in pools of light and darkness. Caleb kept pace with Nayeli, neither leading nor following, just 2 people happening to move in the same direction. The Confederate soldier's knife weighed heavy in his pocket. Such a small thing, but it changed everything. A man with a knife could cut rope, could defend himself, could make choices. He pulled it out, tested the blade against his thumb, still sharp. "Here," he said, stopping. Nayeli paused, watching him with those careful eyes. He reversed the knife, holding it handle first toward her. The bone grip caught the moonlight. "Take it." She didn't move. "Why?" "Because you might need it. To cut your throat while you sleep." "If that's what you choose." The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and old rain. Somewhere in the distance, rocks shifted. Could be an animal, could be nothing. Both of them tensed, old instincts firing. Nayeli took the knife, Her fingers brushed his as she did, calloused and strong. She tested the weight, the balance, then tucked it into her belt where it would be easy to reach. "You are a fool," she said, but there was no mockery in it. Just observation, like noting the color of the sky. "Been called worse." They started walking again. The land rose gradually, moving from flat land to the first hint of hills. Juniper and piñón began to appear, twisted shapes in the darkness. Their boots crunched on gravel and sand, the only sound for miles. "There's a trading post," Caleb said eventually. "Half a day north, McKenna's station. Man who runs it doesn't ask questions." "And then," he shrugged, "then you go wherever you want, east to your people, if they're still there, west to California, north to the mining camps, south to Mexico. Your choice." "You think it is that simple? A white man sets an Apache woman free and she just walks away?" "I think freedom's never simple, but it starts with walking." Nayeli made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else. "You know nothing of my world." "No, but I know cages." She glanced at him sideways. In the moonlight, he could see the questions forming, but she didn't ask them. Not yet. Trust was built in actions, not words, and they were still strangers measuring each other's truth. They found a shallow wash where flash floods had carved a winding path through the hardpan. Cottonwoods grew here, their leaves rustling with secrets. Water had pooled in the rocky bottom, not much, but enough. Caleb knelt, cupped his hands, drank carefully. The water tasted of minerals and distance. When he finished, he moved back, giving her space. She approached the pool like a deer alert, ready to bolt. Only when she was sure he wouldn't move did she drink. "We could camp here," he suggested. "Move at first light." "You sleep. I do not need rest." "Everyone needs rest." "I do not sleep near strangers." He nodded, understanding. Trust was earned in small steps or not at all. He found a flat spot beneath a cottonwood, far enough from her to give comfort. His body ached for rest how many days since he'd really slept. But he sat instead of lying down, back against the tree trunk where he could see the approaches. Nayeli settled across the wash, the knife visible at her belt. She sat cross-legged, straight-backed, a guardian statue in the darkness. The moon moved overhead, marking time neither of them counted. "The man in the saloon," she said suddenly. "Pike, he will come." "Probably." "You have no gun." "No." "No horse." "No." "No food, no supplies, no plan." "Got a knife now?" Caleb said mildly. "That's something." This time it was definitely a laugh, short and sharp. "You are not just a fool. You are a dead fool walking." "Been that before, too." The silence stretched between them again, but it was different now. Less wary, more considering. A owl hooted somewhere in the cottonwoods, hunting in the darkness. "Why did they cut your hair?" he asked. Her hand went unconsciously to the ragged edges. "To take my power. A woman's hair holds her strength, her connection to the ancestors. They knew this." "Will it grow back the power? I mean..." "Everything grows back, given time, or it doesn't, and you learn to live without it." Philosophy from someone who'd lost more than hair. Caleb understood that, too. He'd left pieces of himself scattered across battlefields from Shiloh to Appomattox. Some things you recovered, others you learned to live around, like a tree growing around a fence post. "You fought in the white man's war." Nayeli said it wasn't a question. "Yes." "Which side?" "The one that wore blue, though by the end, it didn't much matter. Dead men look the same in any uniform." "My father said the same. He fought your armies for 20 years. Said soldiers were like seasons. They came, they went, they always returned." "Was your father's gone?" Her jaw tightened. "Gone. My mother, my sisters, my whole band, scattered or dead. Pike spoke truth about one thing: there was a raid, but not by us. We were gathering piñon nuts for winter. The soldiers came at dawn. I woke to gunfire and screaming." She told it flat, without emotion. Just facts laid out like stones. But her hands clenched and unclenched, and the knife at her belt caught the moonlight with each movement. "I'm sorry," Caleb said. "Your sorrow changes nothing." "No, but it's all I have to offer." She studied him across the wash. "You are strange for a white man. Most would have kept me, used me, sold me again when they tired of me. Why spend your last dollar for nothing?" He thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated, wrapped up in too many memories. A farmhouse burning, his sister's screams, orders to shoot civilians, the weight of a rifle that got heavier with each life it took, the slow realization that winning a war could feel exactly like losing one. "Maybe I was tired of taking things," he said finally. "Wanted to try giving something back." "To who, not to me? You don't know me." "To the world, I guess, to balance the scales a little." "The world does not care about balance. It cares about strength." Then maybe I was doing it for me, to remember what it felt like to do something decent. Nayeli was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "My grandmother used to say that the world was a web. Every action pulled on other threads. Every kindness, every cruelty, all connected. She said you could never know where the threads led, only that they led somewhere." Sounds like a wise woman. They killed her third, after my mother and eldest sister." The words hung in the air like smoke. Caleb didn't try to fill the silence with empty comfort. Sometimes witness was all you could offer to hear the truth and not turn away from it. The moon was setting now, the darkness growing deeper. Soon it would be the empty hour before dawn, when the world held its breath. "You should sleep," Nayeli said. "I will watch." "I'm fine." "No, you sway like a willow. When did you last eat?" He tried to remember. 2 days 3. The hardtack was gone, traded for information about water sources. His stomach had stopped complaining, moving past hunger into emptiness. "There are prickly pears near the rocks," she said, "and mesquite pods. Not much, but something." "I'm fine," he repeated. She stood in one fluid motion, disappeared into the darkness. He thought about calling after her, but what would be the point? If she wanted to run, this was her chance. The knife was hers now. The choice was hers. Everything from here on was hers. But she came back, her hands full of purple-red fruit and brown pods. She set half in front of him, kept half for herself. The prickly pear was sweet and full of seeds. The mesquite pods took work to chew but filled the empty spaces. It wasn't much, but it was something freely given, and that made it a feast. "Thank you," he said. She shrugged. "The web pulls both ways. You gave me a knife, I give you food. Neither of us owes the other now." They ate in companionable silence. The stars wheeled overhead, marking time in their ancient patterns. When the food was gone, Caleb found himself talking about the farm in Ohio, about joining up young and stupid and full of ideas about glory, about the first battle, when glory turned to mud and blood and boys calling for their mothers, about the long walk home to nothing, and the longer walk since then. Nayeli listened without interrupting. When he finished, she told her own story about learning to track from her father, to weave from her mother, about the sacred mountains and the ceremonies she'd never complete now, about the moment she decided to survive instead of die, and how sometimes that felt like the harder choice. Dawn was coming, painting the eastern sky purple and gold. Birds began to call, greeting the new day. The desert transformed in the growing light, harsh beauty revealed in every stone and shadow. "McKenna's station," Caleb said. "We should go." Nayeli stood, brushing dust from her torn dress. "And after is after, now is walking." She almost smiled. "You sound like my grandmother again." They left the wash, climbing back to higher ground. The trading post was still miles away, and Pike might already be tracking them. But for now, they walked together in the new light, neither leading nor following, just two people who'd chosen to head in the same direction. The knife hung at Nayeli's belt. Catching the sun, her hair was still short, ragged, but her stride was strong, and her eyes looked forward instead of back. And beside her, a tired soldier in a faded uniform walked on, no longer carrying the weight of his last dollar. Freedom, Caleb thought, really did begin with walking. One step, then another. The rest, trust, purpose. Maybe even hope would come with time. Or it wouldn't, and they'd learn to live without it. Either way, they walked on. The night came on cold after they'd passed McKenna's station. The trading post had given them what Caleb's last few coins could buy hardtack: dried beef, a canteen, and wary looks from McKenna himself. The old trader had seen too much to ask questions, but his eyes lingered on Nayeli, on her short hair and torn dress. On the way, she stood ready to bolt at any sudden movement. Now they camped by a dry stream bed, far from any traveled road. The fire was small, just enough to push back the darkness. Caleb had gathered the wood while Nayeli found water in a hidden spring she spotted by the flight patterns of birds' knowledge her father had taught her. She said, back when the world made sense. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, the flames dancing between them. The knife still hung at her belt, but her hand no longer hovered near it constantly. Progress, perhaps, or just exhaustion. "You never asked my clan," she said suddenly. Caleb looked up from the stick he was whittling, nervous habit from the war. Didn't figure it was mine to ask. Most whites want to know. Apache is not enough for them. They want to know which band, which chief, which side of their wars we choose. Does it matter? To them, yes, to know which of us to fear most. And to you, she was quiet for a moment, watching the fire. I am Chiricahua. My father rode with Cochise before the peace. My mother's brother followed Victorio, names that mean blood to your people. Names that mean men to me, Caleb said. Just men fighting for their families, same as anyone. You are strange, she said again, but there was less edge to it now. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes called to each other, not hunting, just checking in, making sure the pack was whole. The sound made something tight in Caleb's chest ease a little. Even predators needed family. During the war, he said, not sure why he was talking, but unable to stop. We burned a farm in Georgia. Orders were orders. The family had already run. But we burned it anyway. House, barn, fields, everything. He paused, remembering. There was a doll in the yard. Cloth and straw. Button eyes. Must have been dropped in the leaving. I stood there watching it burn and thought, this is what we've become. Men who burn dolls. Nayeli shifted, her shadow moving against the rocks. Why tell me this? Don't know. Maybe because you understand losing everything. Maybe because I need to say it to someone who won't try to justify it. There is no justifying. There is only what is done and what comes after. Your grandmother again. No, that is mine. They fell back into silence, but it was companionable now. The quiet of people who'd shared enough truth to sit together without words. The fire burned lower, and Caleb added another stick, careful not to make it too large. Big fires could be seen for miles in this flat country. I'll take first watch, he offered. No need, I do not sleep. You haven't slept in 2 days. I have not slept well in 2 months, she corrected. Not since the morning they came. He understood that, too. Sleep was when the guards came down, when the memories crept in through the cracks. Still, you should try. And if Pike comes while I dream, then I'll wake you. She studied him across the dying fire. You would fight him without a gun. I'd try. You would die. Probably, but you'd have time to run. Why would you die for someone you do not know? It was a fair question. 2 days ago, they'd been strangers in a saloon. Now here they sat, sharing a fire and the kind of truths that only came in darkness. What had changed everything and nothing? "Maybe I wouldn't be dying for you," he said slowly, working it out as he spoke. "Maybe I'd be dying for the man I want to be instead of the one I've been." Nayeli was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't respond. Then, "That is either wisdom or foolishness. I cannot tell which. Let me know when you figure it out." A sound made them both freeze footsteps on gravel, deliberate and unhurried. Caleb's hand found a rock. Poor weapon, but better than nothing. Nayeli's knife whispered from its sheath. But it was only a deer. A young doe picking her way down to where water might pool after rain. She saw them, assessed the danger, decided they were no threat. Her tail flicked once as she passed. White flag in the darkness. "See?" Caleb said. "Even deer know we're harmless." "Deer are fools. That is why they end up in cooking pots." But she was almost smiling, and the knife went back into its sheath. Progress. Definitely. "Tell me about before," he said. "Before the soldiers. Before the running." So she did, her voice soft in the darkness. She told him about summer camps in the mountains where the air was cool and sweet, about gathering acorns with her sisters, competing to see who could fill their baskets first, about her mother's laughter and her father's stories, about ceremonies that marked the seasons and the stages of life. "I was to have my sunrise ceremony that spring," she said. 4 days of dancing, of becoming a woman in the eyes of my people. My mother had been preparing for months. The white shell dress was nearly finished. What happened to it? Burned, with everything else. The loss in her voice was deeper than rivers. Not just a dress, but a future, a place in the world, a way of being that could never be recovered. "I'm sorry," he said again, knowing how useless the words were. "I would have danced from dawn to dusk," she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "The godmother would have sung the old songs, and I would have become changing woman, bringing blessing to my people. Instead, I became this neither girl nor woman, neither free nor slave, walking between worlds with a stranger who spent his last dollar on foolish principles. I regret it." She thought about it. "Ask me when we are not running." The fire had burned to coals now, red eyes glowing in the darkness. The night pressed close around them, full of small sounds, insects, wind in the rocks, the earth itself breathing. Caleb found himself drowsing despite his intention to keep watch. "Sleep," Nayeli said. "I will wake you if death comes calling." He wanted to argue, but his body had reached its limit. 2 days of walking on little food. The constant vigilance, the weight of memory it all pressed down like stones. He stretched out on the hard ground, using his arm as a pillow. "If I sleep," he said, "and you decide to leave, take the canteen. Water matters more than company. If I leave, you will know. I do not sneak away like a thief." Just making sure we're clear. "We are clear. Now sleep, before you fall over and I have to drag you." He closed his eyes, expecting the usual parade of nightmares. But instead, he found himself thinking of the doe, picking her delicate way through danger, tail flicking dismissively at their presence. Sometimes survival was just deciding what wasn't worth fearing. He woke once in the deep night. The fire had died to ashes, but starlight was enough to see Nayeli still sitting upright, the knife across her knees. She was singing, so softly he could barely hear it, a melody that rose and fell like wind in the canyons. A prayer song, maybe, or a lament, or both. "Sleep," she said without turning. "The night is quiet." He slept again, and this time dreamed of nothing at all. Dawn came gentle, painting the rocks pink and gold. Caleb woke to find Nayeli gone, and for a moment felt the hollow drop of abandonment. Then he saw her coming back through the scrub, carrying the canteen freshly filled. "The spring runs stronger in the morning," she said, handing him the water. "We should fill everything we can carry." They broke their simple camp, scattering the ashes, brushing away the signs of their passing. It wouldn't fool a good tracker, but it might slow them down. Every hour gained was an hour closer to what neither of them had spoken of, destinations beyond vague directions. As they prepared to leave, Nayeli suddenly moved close. Closer than she'd been except for that first moment when he'd steadied her in the saloon. She reached out, quick as thought, and pressed the knife handle into his hand. "Your turn," she said. "I have carried it through the night. Now you carry it through the day. It's yours. It is ours until it isn't." He took the knife, understanding the test and the trust in equal measure. They would trade it back and forth, this small blade that had become something larger than steel and bone. A symbol, maybe, or just a practical arrangement between two people learning how to walk in the same direction. The sun climbed higher, and they turned their faces west, toward mountains that might hide them or might hide their enemies. It didn't matter which. They would walk either way, because walking was what free people did. One step, then another, while the desert woke around them and the knife passed between them like a promise neither quite dared to name. The fourth night found them sheltered in a grove of mesquite trees, their twisted branches forming a natural walls against the wind. They'd covered good ground, but Nayeli had spotted dust clouds on their back trail that afternoon. Riders, maybe 4 or 5, moving steady but not pushing hard. Hunters who knew their prey couldn't run forever. The fire tonight was smaller than ever, barely more than coals hidden in a scraped-out pit. They sat close, sharing its meager warmth, the knife resting on the ground between them like a bridge neither had crossed. "They will catch us tomorrow," Nayeli said matter-of-factly, "or the day after. We cannot outrun horses forever." Caleb knew she was right. They'd been lucky so far, but luck was like water in the desert, precious and quick to disappear. There's a box canyon about 10 miles west, Agua Fria, one way in, but the walls can be climbed if you know where. "You know where. I came through here 2 years ago. Different circumstances. Same problem, men on horses wanting what I had." "What did you have then?" "Information about troop movements. Turned out both sides wanted it bad enough to kill for it." "And you escaped?" "I survived. Not quite the same thing." She studied him in the firelight. 4 days together had worn away some of the sharp edges between them, but mysteries remained. "You carry many ghosts." "Don't we all?" "Yes, but some men let their ghosts drive them. You seem to walk beside yours." It was an apt description. The dead were always their friends and enemies alike, their faces clear as noon whenever he closed his eyes, but somewhere between Georgia and here, he'd stopped trying to outrun them. "My father used to say," Nayeli continued, "that warriors who died badly became owl spirits, calling in the night, but warriors who died well became wind, free to go everywhere, touching everything." She paused. "I think your ghosts are wind." "And yours?" "Mine are still owls, still calling." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds. Then Nayeli spoke again, her voice different, urgent, and low. "When they come, you should let them take me." Caleb didn't answer immediately, just added another small stick to the coals. "That's your plan, just give up." "It is sense. They want me, not you. You can walk away, find another town, another life." "Could do that. But you won't." "No." "Why?" The word came out sharp, frustrated. "I am nothing to you. A stranger. An Apache woman with no clan, no family, no future. Why die for nothing?" Caleb thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated, part stubbornness, part principle, part something else he couldn't name. In the war, he'd followed orders that led to dead children and burned homes. Since then, he'd drifted like smoke, belonging nowhere, believing in nothing. Until that moment in the saloon when he'd seen her eyes fierce and unbroken, despite everything trying to break her. "You're not nothing," he said finally. You're someone who refused to beg when begging might have saved you. Someone who took a knife from a stranger's hand and didn't use it to rob him. Someone who shares food she gathered and water she found. He met her gaze across the dying fire. In my book, that makes you worth more than all the gold in California. Pretty words. They will not stop bullets. No, but ugly words wouldn't stop them either. She made that sound again, half laugh, half something else. You are impossible. I've been told that too. I do not need protection, she said, but there was less heat in it now. I know, that's not what I'm offering. Then what? A choice, Caleb said simply. They come. We face them together. Or you tell me to go, and I go, but it's your choice, not theirs, not mine, yours. Nayeli was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with something that might have been tears if she was the crying type. No one has given me choices since the morning they came. Then it's about time someone did. She picked up the knife, turned it over in her hands. The firelight caught on the blade, sending small flashes into the darkness. My grandmother had a story about Coyote. He found Eagle caught in a trap, and Eagle said, "Free me and I will carry you to the sky." Coyote freed him, but Eagle flew away alone. So Coyote called out, "You lied to me." And Eagle replied, "No, I carry you with me now, in my heart. That is better than the sky." Your grandmother was a wise woman. She was, but I never understood that story until now. She held out the knife to him. Handle first. He took it, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Such a simple gesture, but weighted with meaning, trust, partnership, something deeper than words. Tomorrow, then, she said, we face them together. Together. They settled in for the night, taking turns at watch as had become their custom. But this time, when Nayeli's turn came, she sat closer to where he lay, and when he woke once in the deep darkness, he found she had dozed off, her head tilted back against a mesquite trunk. He let her sleep, keeping watch over both of them while stars wheeled overhead like the world's slowest clock. Morning came too soon, bringing with it the distant sound of horses. Nayeli woke instantly, alert and ready. They quickly scattered their camp, drank deep from the canteen, checked their meager supplies. The knife went back to Nayeli's belt if there was fighting. She was better with a blade than he was. The canyon, she asked. The canyon, but first, Caleb pointed to a jumble of rocks about a quarter-mile away. We make them think we're going north. Leave obvious track, then double back through the rocks. Might buy us an hour. She nodded, understanding immediately. They set off, deliberately careless, leaving clear prints in the sandy soil. At the rocks, they turned sharply west, picking their way carefully across stone that wouldn't hold sign. It was an old trick, but sometimes old tricks worked best. The sun climbed higher, beating down with increasing force. They moved steadily but didn't run. Running in this heat would kill them faster than any bullet. Behind them, the dust cloud had stopped, probably where they'd turned, trackers puzzling out the deception. There, Caleb pointed ahead where the land rose into red cliffs. Agua Fria Canyon. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 horses abreast. The walls rose sheer on both sides, red rock painted with shadows. It looked like a trap because it was one, but sometimes the trap had advantages too. They entered the canyon, and immediately the temperature dropped. The walls blocked the sun, creating a corridor of blessed shade. Their footsteps echoed off stone, coming back strange and multiplied. The climb, Nayeli asked, scanning the walls. About half a mile in, north wall, there's a crack that goes most of the way up, and handholds after that. Can you make it? He glanced at her, saw real concern there. When had they started worrying about each other? Can you? I was climbing cliffs before I could properly walk. My father said I was part bighorn sheep. Then we'll manage. They pushed deeper into the canyon. The walls seemed to press closer. and Caleb fought down the memory of other tight places, trenches filled with mud and death. Mine shafts that collapsed with men inside. This was different. This was a choice. They found the crack right where he remembered. A diagonal slash in the rock face that a determined person could chimney up. Above it, the handholds were visible if you knew where to look, a ladder of stone leading to freedom. "We should climb now," Nayeli said. "Before they—" The echo of hoofbeats cut her off. Coming fast, no longer trying for stealth. They'd figured out the trick and were pushing hard to close the gap. "Go," Caleb said. "Start climbing." "Together, you said—" "Together doesn't mean stupid. Climb. I'll be right behind you." For a moment, he thought she'd argue. Then she was moving, wedging herself into the crack and starting up with the fluid grace of someone born to vertical spaces. Caleb watched her progress, one ear on the approaching horses. She was 20 feet up when the riders appeared, 4 men, Pike in the lead, his face red with heat and fury. They pulled up short, horses lathered and blowing. "Well, well," Pike called out. "The fool and his purchase. Thought you'd be halfway to California by now." "Thought wrong," Caleb replied, keeping his body between them and where Nayeli climbed. "Step aside. The woman's legally mine, bought and paid for." "Funny thing about that, the bill of sale seems to have gotten lost." Pike's hand dropped to his gun. "I'm done playing games. Soldier boy. Move or bleed." "I've bled before. Doesn't bother me much." One of the other riders, a thin man with dead eyes, spoke up. "Just shoot him. Harlan, we're wasting time." But Pike hesitated. Killing was one thing in the heat of a fight, another in cold blood with witnesses. And these men were witnesses. Hired guns whose loyalty went only as deep as their pay. "I'll make you a deal," Pike said finally. "Walk away now, and we'll call it square. Hell, I'll even give you your $1 back, more than fair for 4 days' rental." Above, Caleb could hear Nayeli climbing, the soft scrape of cloth on stone, almost to the handholds now. "Just a little more time." "No deal," he said. "You're going to die for a squaw?" the thin man asked, genuinely puzzled. "Why?" "Because I choose to," Caleb answered. "Same reason you chose to chase us across the desert. Same reason she chose not to kill me that first night when she had the chance. We all make choices. This is mine." "Pretty speech," Pike said, and drew his gun. But Nayeli's voice rang out from above, clear and strong. "Your fight is with me, not him." They all looked up. She stood on a narrow ledge 40 feet up, the knife glinting in her hand. For a moment, Caleb's heart stopped if she fell from there. "Come down, girl," Pike ordered. "Game's over." "Yes," Nayeli agreed. "It is." She looked down at Caleb, and in her eyes he saw not surrender but something else, determination, mixed with what might have been gratitude. "Thank you," she called, "for the choice." Then she turned and began climbing again, not down but up, moving fast toward the rim. "Stop her!" Pike shouted, but it was too late. She was beyond their reach now, flowing up the rock face like water in reverse. The thin man raised his rifle, but Caleb was already moving, not toward the man that would have been suicide, but to the horses, slapping the nearest on the rump and shouting. The animals, already nervous in the confined space, reared and plunged. The rifle shot went wild, striking sparks off stone. In the chaos, Caleb scrambled for the crack in the wall. A bullet whined past his ear as he wedged himself in and started climbing. Below, Pike was screaming orders. But the narrow canyon worked against them, no room to maneuver. No clear shot without hitting each other. Caleb climbed as he'd never climbed before, knowing that when they got the horses under control, he'd be an easy target. His hands were slick with sweat, his muscles already burning. But above, he could see Nayeli reaching the rim, turning back to look for him. "Go!" he shouted. "Run!" She shook her head, and he saw her scanning the rim for something, a loose rock, a dead branch, anything to help. That's when the thin man got a clear shot. The bullet caught Caleb in the side, spinning him half out of the crack. For a moment he hung by one hand, the world tilting crazily. Then Nayeli was screaming something in Apache, not at him but at the men below. Words that needed no translation. Curses that transcended language. She disappeared from view, and Caleb thought she'd finally run. Good, at least one of them would make it. He forced himself to keep climbing, though each movement sent fire through his side. Blood made the handhold slippery. Below, Pike was organizing his men for a careful shot. Then Nayeli reappeared at the rim, and she wasn't alone. 3 Apache warriors stood with her, rifles trained on the canyon floor. Where they'd come from, Caleb had no idea, but their meaning was clear. "The woman is under our protection," one of them called down in accented English. "You will leave, now, or stay forever." Pike and his men froze, calculating odds. 4 against 3, but the high ground made all the difference. And Apache warriors with rifles in a good position. That was a fight no sane man wanted. "This isn't over," Pike called up, but he was already backing his horse. "Yes," the warrior replied calmly. "It is." They watched the riders leave, waited until the hoofbeats faded completely. Then Nayeli was climbing back down, sure-footed as a cat, a rope in her hands. She reached Caleb just as his strength gave out. "I told you to run," he managed. "And I told you we face them together," she replied, looping the rope around him. "You whites never listen." The warriors hauled him up, and gentle hands carried him from the rim. As consciousness faded, Caleb heard Nayeli speaking rapidly in Apache, heard the word that needed no translation in her tone, please. He'd given her a choice, and she'd made it. Not the one he'd expected. But then, freedom meant the right to surprise everyone, including yourself. The last thing he felt was her hand in his, holding tight as the world went dark around him. The world came back slowly, in pieces. First the pain, a deep fire in his side that pulsed with each heartbeat. Then sounds, voices speaking Apache, the crackle of a fire. Children laughing somewhere distant. Finally, sight a brush shelter overhead. Smoke hole showing a patch of brilliant blue sky. Caleb tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The movement sent lightning through his body, and he couldn't suppress a groan. Instantly, a small face appeared in his field of vision, a boy, maybe 7 or 8, with curious dark eyes. "He wakes," the child called in English, then darted away. Moments later, Nayeli was there, carrying a water gourd. She helped him drink, her movements gentle but efficient. In the daylight filtering through the shelter, he could see she'd changed her torn dress, replaced by a simple cloth skirt and blouse. Her hair, though still short, had been evened out, making her look less like a victim and more like who she truly was. How long, he managed. 3 days. The bullet went through clean, but you lost much blood. She settled back on her heels, studying him. The medicine woman says you will live if you do not do anything foolish. When have I ever done anything foolish? Do you want the list by day or by hour? He tried to laugh, stopped when it hurt. The warriors at the canyon. My cousin Kuruk and his friends, they were hunting when they heard the shots. Her expression darkened. Pike and his men are gone. Kuruk followed them back toward Dust Creek to be sure. Your cousin just happened to be hunting there. The Apache know these lands. They watch when strangers pass through. She looked away. I had hoped to find some of my mother's band. Instead, they found me. The boy reappeared, bolder now, carrying a bowl of something that smelled like herbs and meat. Behind him came an elderly woman, her face mapped with years but her eyes sharp as obsidian. She spoke to Nayeli in rapid Apache, gesturing at Caleb. She says you are too thin, Nayeli translated. That all white men are too thin, but you especially. She wants to know if your mother never fed you properly. Tell her my mother did her best with what she had. Nayeli translated, and the old woman's expression softened slightly. She bustled forward, checking his bandages with hands that were gentle despite their gnarled appearance. When she was satisfied, she spoke again. She says you will have a scar, but scars are good. They show you have lived through something worth marking. Nayeli paused. She also says you are lucky I was there to argue for your life. Some wanted to leave you in the canyon. Why didn't they? Because I told them how you spent your last dollar, how you gave me the knife, how you stood between me and Pike's guns. She met his eyes. I told them you were my responsibility. There was something in the way she said it that suggested the Apache word meant more than the English translation. But before he could ask, they were interrupted by new arrivals, 3 children, 2 girls and another boy, pecking around the shelter entrance like curious birds. The old woman clapped her hands, scolding them, but Nayeli smiled. It's all right. Grandmother Maria, they've never seen a white man up close who wasn't trying to hurt someone. Grandmother Maria, not her Apache name, surely, but what she allowed outsiders to call her grumbled but let the children creep closer. The youngest girl, perhaps 5, reached out tentatively to touch Caleb's hair, sandy brown where theirs was black. Different, she whispered in English. Yes, Caleb agreed. Different. The children giggled and scattered, but not far. Throughout the day, as Caleb drifted in and out of sleep, he was aware of them playing some game with stones, helping with camp chores, occasionally sneaking glances at the strange pale man in their midst. When evening came, Nayeli helped him outside to sit by the fire. The camp was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 40 people, mostly women, children, and elderly. The few warriors he saw looked tired, watchful. This wasn't a war band. This was what remained of one, the survivors trying to hold together. Wolf's Gully is a day's ride south, Nayeli said quietly, following his gaze. We were going there when we heard the shots. My cousin thought it might be their people in trouble. Lucky for me they investigated. Lucky for both of us. I could not have carried you far. They sat in companionable silence, watching the camp's evening routines. Women preparing food, children being gathered for sleep, men checking weapons and discussing something in low voices, normal life, or what passed for normal when your world had been torn apart and rebuilt too many times. They're talking about moving, Nayeli explained. Too many patrols lately, too many settlers. The old places are becoming dangerous. Where will they go? Mexico, maybe, or deeper into the mountains where white men don't like to follow. She poked at the fire with a stick. Running. Always running. One of the warriors approached Karuk, Caleb assumed. Seeing the family resemblance to Nayeli in his angular face and direct gaze, he spoke to his cousin, then looked at Caleb and switched to English. You are the one who bought her freedom. It wasn't a question, but Caleb nodded anyway. For $1. It was all I had. Karuk studied him, and Caleb had the uncomfortable feeling of being weighed and measured by standards he didn't understand. Finally, the warrior sat down across from them. I fought white soldiers for 3 years, he said. Killed many, lost more. I thought I knew your people greedy, cruel, taking always taking. He paused. Then my cousin tells me of a white man who gave away his last coin and asked nothing in return. This puzzles me. It puzzles me too sometimes, Caleb admitted. That drew an almost smile from Karuk. She says you protected her, stood against men with guns though you had none. Is this true? I stood protecting. That might be too strong a word for what I managed. He is being modest, Nayeli interjected. He drew their fire so I could climb. The bullet in his side was meant for me. Karuk absorbed this, then asked, why? The question everyone wanted answered, including Caleb himself. He thought about it, watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. In the war, I followed orders, did things because I was told to. because everyone else was doing them. When it ended, I swore I'd never again do something just because it was expected. He met Kuruk's eyes. When I saw your cousin in that saloon, everyone expected me to walk away, so I didn't. You define yourself by opposition. I try to define myself by choice. Kuruk was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, said something to Nayeli in Apache, and walked away. She was smiling slightly. What did he say? He said you are either very wise or very stupid, but either way, you are welcome at our fire. As if to prove the point, one of the women brought them food, a stew of rabbit and wild onions, flavored with herbs Caleb couldn't identify. It was the best meal he'd had in months, maybe years. Not because of the ingredients, but because it was freely given, shared without obligation or debt. Later, as the camp settled for the night, Nayeli helped him back to the shelter. The movement exhausted him more than it should have. Reminder that a bullet wound was no small thing, even one that went clean through. Rest, she said, adjusting the blanket around him. Tomorrow we'll see if you can walk farther. Nayeli, he caught her hand as she turned to go. Thank you for arguing for my life, for staying. She looked down at their joined hands, then back at his face. You gave me a choice when no one else would. Did you think I would choose to let you die? I didn't think you'd choose anything. That was the point. Then you understand nothing of Apache women. But she squeezed his hand before letting go. Sleep now. The children will want to stare at you again tomorrow. And you should look less like a ghost when they do. She left him there in the shelter, but he could hear her settling nearby, close enough to hear if he called out. The camp sounds gradually faded. Dogs settling. Fires banking. Families drawing together against the desert night. Through the smoke hole, stars appeared one by one, the same stars that had watched him walk away from a war, drift through empty years, spend his last dollar on a stranger's freedom. Now they watched him lie wounded in an Apache camp, protected by people who had every reason to hate him, alive because a woman he'd freed had chosen to save him in return. The circle of it appealed to him, actions creating reactions, choices spreading like ripples in still water. His grandmother would have called it providence. Nayeli's grandmother would have called it the web of connection. Caleb just called it life, messy and painful and occasionally graceful. Somewhere in the distance, a child cried out in sleep and was quickly soothed. A dog barked once and was hushed. The night wrapped around the camp like a blanket, and Caleb let it pull him under, feeling for the first time in years that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not home, he didn't know if he'd ever have that again, but something close enough, a place where his choices mattered, where the threads of connection held firm, where even a foolish man spending his last dollar could find something worth more than gold. The stars wheeled overhead, marking time in their ancient patterns, and Caleb slept without dreams beneath their light. The Hidden Ashes Band, as Caleb learned they called themselves, had survived by being careful. Their camp moved every few weeks, following water and game, but always staying ahead of army patrols. They were the remnants of 3 different groups, brought together by loss and led by an old chief named Taki, whose lined face spoke of decades watching his world shrink. Caleb had been with them 2 weeks now, his wound healing clean thanks to Grandmother Maria's poultices and Nayeli's constant care. He could walk without support, though his side still pulled with sharp reminders when he moved too quickly. The children had grown bolder, teaching him words in Apache while he showed them how to whistle through grass blades. But tonight was different. Tonight, the entire band gathered in council, and at its heart sat Caleb and Nayeli. Chief Taki spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. Nayeli translated, her own voice carefully neutral. He says you have eaten our food, slept in our shelters, walked among our children. Some say this makes you a guest. Others say it makes you a burden we can no longer carry. The fire crackled between them, sending shadows dancing across stern faces. Caleb recognized some Kuruk, who had argued for letting him stay, Victorio's son Nana, who watched him with open suspicion, the women who had tended his wounds with reluctant compassion. "What do you say?" Caleb asked Nayeli. She was quiet for a moment. "I have not been asked to speak." "But if you were, then I would say that the world is already full of enemies. Why make more when we could make one less?" Chief Taki spoke again, gesturing toward the east where the stars were beginning to fade. "Tomorrow we leave this place." Nayeli translated. "South, toward the Blue Mountains, where the soldiers do not like to follow. The question is, do you come with us, or do we leave you here with supplies to find your own way?" "There's a third option," Nana interjected in accented English. "We make certain he can tell no one where we've gone." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Several of the warriors shifted slightly, hands moving toward weapons. But Karuk spoke up, his voice sharp. "The white man shed blood defending one of ours. That makes him a fool." Nana cut him off. "My sister's daughter stands before us with hair cut short by white hands, and you want to welcome one of them into our band?" "I want to honor the courage I see," Karuk replied, "even when it comes in pale skin." The argument might have escalated, but Taki raised his hand for silence. He looked at Nayeli and spoke at length. Her translation came in pieces, her voice growing strained. "He says, I must choose. As the one who brought you here, as the one whose freedom you bought, the choice is mine." She paused, struggling with something. "But there is a test, an old way. If I claim you as one who belongs with us, I must be willing to prove it." "What kind of test?" She met his eyes, and he saw fear there, not for herself, but for him. "Blood for blood, life for life. I must show that you matter enough to risk everything for—" Before Caleb could respond, Taki spoke again. This time, he produced something from his robes, a knife, its blade dark with age, its handle wrapped in leather so old it was almost black. "If I claim you," Nayeli translated slowly, "I must be willing to take your life if you ever betray us, here, now, in front of everyone." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I must draw blood to show I could kill you if needed." The council waited. The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling upward. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the circle, a child whimpered and was quickly hushed. Caleb looked around the circle of faces, some hostile, some neutral, a few almost sympathetic. These people had lost everything to men who looked like him. Their caution wasn't cruelty, it was survival. "Tell them yes," he said quietly. "Caleb, tell them I accept their test." Nayeli translated, and Taki nodded slowly. He held out the ancient knife to her. She took it with hands that only trembled slightly, testing its weight. The blade was sharp despite its age, catching the firelight like a sliver of night. "Stand," she said to Caleb. He rose carefully, favoring his wounded side. The circle of watchers drew back slightly, giving them room. In the flickering light, he could see the conflict in Nayeli's face, the weight of what she was being asked to do. To prove— "Where?" she asked softly. He understood. She had to cut him, had to show she could and would. But where mattered too shallow, and it meant nothing. Too deep, and it could kill. "Here," he said, indicating his left arm. "Above the elbow. It'll bleed well, but heal clean." She moved closer, the knife steady now in her grip. Their eyes met, and in hers he saw an apology, a question, a promise all at once. "I trust you," he said simply. The blade was ice against his skin, then fire as she drew it across in one smooth motion. Blood welled immediately, running down his arm in dark streams. It hurt, but he'd known worse. He kept his eyes on hers, didn't flinch, didn't pull away. But then something changed in Nayeli's expression. She looked at the blood on the blade, at the watching faces, at Taki's impassive expression. When she spoke, it wasn't in English but in Apache. her voice ringing clear and strong across the circle. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, murmurs. Nana's sharp protest. Taki's eyes widened slightly, the first emotion Caleb had seen him show. Karuk actually smiled. "What did you say?" Caleb asked, pressing his hand against the wound to slow the bleeding. "I said this is not enough," Nayeli replied, her chin raised in defiance. "I said if they want proof of my commitment, blood is easy. Anyone can spill blood." She turned to face the council fully. "I offer something harder." She switched back to Apache, speaking directly to Taki. The old chief listened, his weathered face revealing nothing. When she finished, the silence stretched so long that Caleb could hear his own heartbeat. Finally, Taki spoke, just a few words, but they fell like stones into still water. "He asks if you are certain." Nayeli translated. "Once spoken, this cannot be taken back." "I am certain." "You don't even know what I offered." "I know you. That's enough." She turned back to Taki, nodded once. The chief stood slowly, joints protesting the movement. He walked to where they stood, took the bloodied knife from Nayeli's hand. Then, to Caleb's surprise, he spoke in English. "She offers to bind her fate to yours. Where you walk, she walks. If you betray us, she dies with you. If you prove true, she stands as your..." The word does not translate. Speaker protector family. He studied Caleb with eyes that had seen too much. "Do you accept this bond?" Caleb looked at Nayeli. She stood straight and proud. Blood on her hands, his blood chin raised as if daring anyone to challenge her choice. This woman who had lost everything, who had every reason to hate his kind, was offering to tie her life to his. "I accept," he said. Taki nodded, then did something unexpected. He took Caleb's wounded arm, then Nayeli's hand, and pressed them together so their blood mingled. He spoke in Apache, words that sounded ancient, formal. "It is done," he said finally in English. "You are bound. Your fates are woven together until death separates the threads." He looked between them. "May you both be worthy of this choosing." The council began to disperse, but not before each member filed past them. Some nodded acknowledgement. Others simply stared. Nana spat at the ground near Caleb's feet, but offered no other challenge. Karuk clasped his shoulder, careful of the wounded side. "You are a lucky man," he said quietly. "My cousin does not give her loyalty lightly." Grandmother Maria bustled forward with clean cloth and her ever-present medicines, scolding them both in rapid Apache while she tended Caleb's arm. The cut was clean, would heal with barely a scar, but she fussed over it anyway. When they were finally alone by the dying fire, Caleb turned to Nayeli. "Why?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. "You asked me once why I didn't kill you that first night. Do you remember what you said? If that's what you choose. Not please don't, or I can help you. Just if that's what you choose." I remember. No one had spoken to me like that since before. Like I was a person who could make choices, not a thing to be used or saved or pitied. She looked at him directly. "You gave me back myself. How could I not stand for you? Binding your life to mine seems like more than standing for me." "Perhaps, but the world has taken everything else. My family, my home, my place." She touched her short hair reflexively. "Let me choose what to give. Let that be mine." They sat in silence, watching the embers pulse like slow heartbeats. Around them, the camp settled for the night guards taking position, families drawing close, the endless rhythm of survival continuing. "What happens now?" Caleb asked. "Now we pack. Tomorrow we walk south. After that," she shrugged, "we live, we survive, we protect each other. And if I disappoint you, if I'm not worthy of what you've offered..." She smiled then, the first full smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, revealing the woman she might have been in a different world. "Then I'll tell you, with words, not knives." The smile faded, but warmth remained in her eyes. "We are bound now, Caleb Thorne, in the old way. That means your foolishness is my foolishness. Your courage is my courage. Your choices are, not mine, but tied to mine."
Sounds complicated.
"Life is complicated, but now we face it together." She stood, offered him her hand. He took it, let her pull him to his feet. His arm throbbed, his side ached, but he felt strangely light. For the first time since the war, he belonged somewhere, not to a place, but to a person, a connection chosen rather than assigned. Together, he agreed. They walked back through the camp, past the shelters where children slept, past the old ones keeping watch, past the warriors planning tomorrow's route. Their shadows merged in the firelight, two becoming one, then separated again as they moved beyond the light's reach. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the journey south, the constant threat of pursuit, the daily struggle to keep the band alive and free. But tonight, they had chosen. Not the easy path, but the one that mattered.
Blood for blood, life for life, choice for choice.
The stars watched it all with their ancient eyes. And if they judged, they kept their opinions to themselves. The moment came in the cold hour before dawn. Nayeli stood in the council circle, the ancient knife heavy in her hands, facing Caleb across the dying fire. The entire band had gathered, men, women, children pulled from their beds to witness. Chief Taki's face was stone, giving nothing away. This was the final test, the one that would determine everything. "The choice is now," Taki said in English, for Caleb's benefit. "Will you take his life to prove your loyalty to your people, or will you spare him and be cast out forever?" The knife trembled slightly in Nayeli's grip. Around them, the Hidden Ashes band waited. Some, like Nana, watched with grim satisfaction, certain she would choose blood. Others, like Kuruk, seemed troubled, torn between old laws and new questions. Caleb stood quietly, making no move to defend himself. His wounded arm was still bandaged from their blood ceremony 2 weeks past. His eyes found Nayeli's across the fire. Steady and calm, he'd known this might come, the final test, the impossible choice. He'd made his peace with it. "Speak, daughter," Taki commanded. "Your people wait." Nayeli looked at the knife, its blade reflecting the firelight like water. Her grandmother's stories echoed in her mind about choices and consequences, about the web that connected all things. She thought of her mother, dead in the dust, her sisters, scattered like seeds in a storm, her hair cut short by cruel hands. Then she thought of a saloon in Dust Creek, and a man who spent his last dollar. "I have lost much to the white man's world," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the pre-dawn stillness. "My family, my home, my place among my people. I have earned the right to take vengeance." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Nana nodded approval. The knife rose in her hands. "This man is white. His people have brought us nothing but sorrow. The old laws say I should take his life, prove my loyalty with his blood." She moved around the fire, approaching Caleb with measured steps. He didn't flinch, didn't step back, just watched her come with those steady eyes that had seen too much. "But I ask you," Nayeli continued, now speaking in Apache, her voice rising with passion. "What are we if we follow only old laws? What are we if we cannot see the man beneath the skin?" She stood before Caleb now, close enough to strike. The camp held its breath. "This man gave me choice when no one else would. He stood between me and guns, though he had none. He bled for me, though I was nothing to him but a stranger." She raised the knife higher. "And now you ask me to kill him to prove I am Apache." The knife flashed down and buried itself in the earth at Caleb's feet. "I am Apache," Nayeli's voice rang out like thunder. "I am the daughter of warriors, the granddaughter of wisdom keepers, and I tell you now, being Apache does not mean being blind. It does not mean being cruel. It means seeing clearly, choosing wisely, Protecting those who protect us. Gasps and angry voices erupted. Nana stepped forward, face twisted with rage, but Kuruk blocked his path. Taki raised his hand for silence, but the crowd was stirring, dividing. Nayeli wasn't finished. She pulled the knife from the ground, held it high so all could see. You want me to prove my loyalty? Then watch. She pressed the blade to her own palm, drawing it across in one swift motion. Blood welled dark in the firelight. Then she reached for Caleb's hand, and he gave it without hesitation. She cut his palm too, then pressed their bleeding hands together. By blood I bind myself not to white or Apache, but to truth. This man is my choice, not my master, not my captive, but my equal. If this makes me less Apache in your eyes, then your eyes need clearing. You dare, Nana started, but an unexpected voice cut him off. Grandmother Maria stepped into the circle, and her presence commanded instant respect. She rarely spoke in council, but when she did, all listened. I have lived through 4 wars, she said, her ancient voice carrying surprising strength. I have seen our numbers shrink like water in drought. I have buried children and grandchildren, watched our sacred places taken, our ways forbidden. She paused, fixing Nana with a stern look. And you would have us kill one of the few whites who has shown us kindness. You would have us become the monsters they paint us as. She moved to stand beside Nayeli and Caleb, her gnarled hand touching their joined ones. I remember another white man. 30 winters passed, a doctor who came to our camp when the spotted sickness struck. We had nothing to pay him, but he stayed. He saved my grandson, though it meant the soldiers arrested him for helping enemies. She looked around the circle. That grandson grew to father 3 children, 9 lives from one act of kindness. This is also the web our ancestors spoke of. Other voices began to rise, some arguing, some supporting. The neat circle dissolved into groups, gesturing, debating. Through it all, Taki watched silently, his dark eyes moving from face to face, reading the currents of his people's hearts. Finally, he stood. The arguments died immediately. Nayeli speaks truth, he said slowly. We have become so used to protecting ourselves that we have forgotten what we protect. Are we only Apache when we fight? Are we only strong when we stand alone? He walked to where Nayeli and Caleb stood, their hands still clasped, blood mingling. You have chosen not just to spare him, but to claim him, to say his path is your path. This is not our way. Nayeli's chin rose, defiant to the end, but Taki wasn't finished. But perhaps, the chief continued, our way must grow, or it will die. The world changes around us like seasons. We must change too, or be buried by winter's snow. He studied Caleb intently. You would stay with us. White man, live as we live. Move as we move. Share our dangers. If you'll have me, Caleb replied simply. And if we are attacked by soldiers, by your people, then they're not my people anymore. Taki nodded slowly, then raised his voice so all could hear. The choice is made, not the choice I expected, but perhaps the one we needed. Nayeli has shown courage greater than killing the courage to forge a new path. And this man, he paused, seeming to search for words. This man is no longer white or Apache. He is something new. He is hers, as she is his. Let any who challenge this challenge me. The declaration rang across the camp. Nana spat on the ground and stalked away, a few others following. But more stayed, gathering around to see this new thing that had been born from an impossible choice. Kuruk was the first to step forward. Welcome, brother, he said to Caleb, then added with a slight smile. Try not to get shot again. My cousin has spilled enough blood for you already. Others came then cautious but curious. The children, who had been watching wide-eyed, crept closer. Little Ayana, the 5-year-old who'd first touched Caleb's hair, tugged at his pants leg. Are you Apache now? She asked in her careful English. Caleb knelt to her level, wincing slightly at the pull on his still healing side. "I don't know what I am," he told her honestly. "But I'm here. Is that enough?" She considered this with a seriousness only small children could manage, then nodded. "Grandmother Maria says belonging is not about blood. It's about choosing to stay when you could go. Your grandmother Maria is very wise. She knows everything." Ayana agreed matter-of-factly, then scampered off to rejoin her playmates. As the crowd dispersed, dawn was breaking over the mountains. The camp would move today, as planned. But something fundamental had shifted. The rigid lines between us and them had blurred, just a little. Not erased, too much pain lay between the peoples for that, but acknowledged as less absolute than before. Nayeli and Caleb stood together as the camp stirred to life around them. Their cut hands had stopped bleeding, but the mark would remain another scar to add to their collections. But this one chosen rather than inflicted. "Thank you," Caleb said quietly, "for choosing the harder path." "Thank you," she replied, "for being worth it." Taki approached them one last time before the morning's preparations began. "You have given me much to think about," he said. "Perhaps this is what the spirits meant when they told me change would come with the season. I thought they meant death. Maybe they meant this transformation." He placed a weathered hand on each of their shoulders. "Walk carefully, both of you. You have chosen to be bridges between worlds. Bridges bear weight from both sides." With that, he moved away, already calling orders for the day's march. The camp exploded into activity, shelters coming down, goods being packed, children being gathered. "Ready?" Nayeli asked. Caleb looked around at the organized chaos, at the people who had just chosen to accept him despite everything history said they should do. His side ached, his hand throbbed, and the trail ahead promised nothing but hardship. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something that might have been hope. "Ready," he said. They joined the work of breaking camp, 2 more pairs of hands among many. The sun climbed higher, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. By full light, the hidden ashes band was moving, a line of survivors heading toward an uncertain future. But they moved together Apache and white, traditional and transformed, all bound by choices made in firelight and sealed in blood, the old ways and the new, walking the same path, leaving footprints that told a different story than the one the world expected. Behind them, the abandoned campsite held only cold ashes and the memory of a choice that changed everything. Ahead, the mountains waited with their promises and threats. And, in between, 2 people walked side by side, living proof that sometimes the hardest choice was also the right one. The attack came at dawn, 5 days into their mountain journey. Caleb woke to the crack of rifles and Nayeli's urgent hand on his shoulder. The camp erupted in chaos, women grabbing children, warriors rushing for weapons, horses screaming in fear. "Pike," Nayeli said grimly. And Caleb knew she was right. The gunfire had the organized rhythm of experienced fighters, not soldiers, hired guns. Then, men who killed for coin and asked no questions. "The children," was all Caleb said, and they moved together without need for more words. The camp's position was good, backed against a cliff face with only 2 approaches, but Pike's men had come prepared. They'd split their force, pinning the defenders while others circled toward the weak side where the youngest and oldest had been gathered. Caleb saw it unfold with a soldier's eye. In minutes, maybe less, those riders would reach the vulnerable. He grabbed a rifle from a fallen warrior, Nashota, who'd shared his tobacco just yesterday, and checked the load. "Go," he told Nayeli. "Get them to the caves." "Together," she reminded him fiercely. "Together doesn't mean stupid," he echoed her own words back. "I'll buy time. Go." She went, running low and fast toward where Grandmother Maria was already herding children toward the hidden caves Kuruk had shown them. Caleb found cover behind a wagon and sighted down the rifle. The morning light was tricky, shadows still long, but he'd shot in worse. His first shot took a rider from his saddle. The second made them pull back, reconsidering their easy charge. But there were too many, and he had too little ammunition. Already he could see Pike himself, that familiar silk vest visible even at distance, directing his men with sharp gestures. A child's scream cut through the battle noise. Caleb turned to see one of Pike's men had broken through, bearing down on little Ayanna, who'd frozen in terror between the camp and safety. Her mother ran for her, but she'd never make it in time. Caleb didn't think. He just moved, sprinting across open ground as bullets whined past. The rider saw him coming, tried to swing his gun around, but Caleb hit him low and hard, using momentum to tear him from the saddle. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and dust. The man was bigger, stronger, but Caleb had learned to fight dirty in too many desperate moments. When they rolled apart, the hired gun stayed down, clutching his throat. Caleb scooped up Ayanna, her small body trembling against his chest, and ran for the caves. He almost made it. The bullet took him high in the back, spinning him around. He had enough presence of mind to fall forward, shielding Ayanna with his body as they hit the ground. The child scrambled free, crying but unhurt, and her mother was there, pulling her to safety. Caleb tried to rise and couldn't. The world had gone strange, tilting at angles that made no sense. But he could still see the battle, could see Karuk and his warriors mounting a fierce defense, could see Nayeli racing back toward him with death in her eyes. "No," he tried to say, but blood came instead of words. She slid to her knees beside him, hands already searching for the wound. What she found made her face go pale beneath its copper tone, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "Not today," she told him. "You don't get to die today." More gunfire. Closer now. Pike's men were pushing hard, paying for every foot with blood, but still coming. Nayeli half dragged, half carried Caleb to better cover, leaving a red trail in the dust. "Listen," Caleb managed, catching her hand. "Take the band. Run. If you say you'll hold them off, I'll shoot you myself," she interrupted. "Now shut up and let me think." But it was Taki who provided the answer. The old chief appeared like a ghost from the smoke, war paint on his weathered face, a rifle in his hands that looked older than creation. He took in the situation with one glance and made his choice. "The passages," he said to Nayeli. "Take him. Take who you can. We'll hold here." "Uncle..." "Go!" The command cracked like a whip. "The future runs while the past stands. This is the way." Nayeli's eyes blazed with argument, but Karuk was there too, bloody but whole. Between them, they got Caleb moving, heading for the narrow cleft in the rocks that led to the network of passages beyond. Others were fleeing 2 women and children, wounded warriors, any who could no longer fight. Behind them, the battle raged. Caleb turned his head, saw Taki standing tall despite his years, organizing the defense with calm precision. Beside him, warriors who'd seemed beaten found new strength. Even Nana was there, his dislike of Caleb forgotten in the face of a greater enemy. "They're buying us time," Karuk said grimly. "We dishonor them if we waste it." The passages were dark, narrow, filled with the sounds of fear and pain. Caleb drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of movement, of Nayeli's voice giving orders, of children crying and being hushed. Time became fluid, measured in heartbeats and harsh breaths. When full awareness returned, they were in a different place, a hidden valley cupped in the mountain's palm, with a spring and grass and walls too steep for horses. Maybe 20 of them had made it, less than half the band. Nayeli was working on his wound, her face set in lines of concentration. The bullet had gone through, which was good, but it had torn things on its way. He could tell by her expression that it wasn't good. "The others?" he asked. "We don't know. Karuk went back to scout." She didn't look up from her work. "Be still." But being still meant thinking about Taki's last stand, about warriors dying for time, about little Ayanna's terror. I should have seen them coming. Should have what been perfect seen the future. Nayeli's voice was sharp with contained emotion. You saved Ayana. You fought for people not your own. What more would you demand of yourself? I brought this on you. Pike came because of me. Now she did look up, and her eyes were fierce. Pike came because Pike is a small man who cannot bear to lose. You think he would have forgotten me if you hadn't been there. Think he would have let any Apache woman walk free if he could profit from her pain. She shook her head. You give yourself too much credit and too much blame. Karuk returned as the sun was setting, and his news was mixed. 7 dead, he reported quietly, including Taki and Nana, but the others scattered Pike's men, killed 4 including their tracker. Pike himself escaped, but wounded. They won't follow immediately. 7 lives, 7 members of an already diminished band. Caleb closed his eyes, adding their faces to his collection of ghosts. Uncle died as he lived. Karuk continued, standing between his people and harm. The children will sing of it. The children who survived, someone said bitterly. Yes, Karuk agreed simply. The ones who survived, as we survived, as we'll continue to survive, because that's what we do. That night, they built no fires. The wounded were tended in darkness, the dead mourned in whispers. Caleb lay propped against a rock, watching stars appear one by one in the strip of sky visible between the canyon walls. Nayeli sat beside him, maintaining the fiction that he needed constant watching. I'm sorry, he said into the darkness.
For what?
For costing you so much, your chief, your people.
Our chief,
she corrected.
our people.
You bled for them today.
That makes them yours as much as mine.
The band won't see it that way. Nana was right, I bring death. Nayeli was quiet for a moment. Then, do you know what Taki said to me before the battle? He said change always demands sacrifice, that the old way and the new way must both pay a price before they can become one way. She found his hand in the darkness. He chose to be that price, as Nana did. In the end, they stood together, the one who accepted you and the one who rejected you, united against a common enemy. Poetic, Caleb said, though the word tasted bitter. Truth often is. They sat in silence, listening to the night sounds of a wounded camp. Somewhere, Grandmother Maria was singing softly to the children, ancient lullabies that promised tomorrow would come. It was a comfort and a lie and a prayer all at once. What happens now? Caleb asked. Now we heal, we mourn, we decide who leads, probably Karuk, if he'll take it. Then we keep moving, keep surviving. She squeezed his hand. We honor the dead by living. And Pike will come again, or someone like him. The world is full of Pikes. Her voice hardened. But we'll be ready next time. And we won't just defend. We'll make them pay such a price for hunting us that others will think twice. It wasn't the Apache way, this talk of calculated vengeance. But then, many things weren't the old way anymore. The band itself was proof fragments of different groups, led by a woman and a white man bound in blood, pursued by enemies that crossed all racial lines. The world was changing, and they were changing with it. Or trying to.
Can you travel tomorrow?
Nayeli asked.
If I have to.
You have to. We all have to. She helped him shift to a more comfortable position. Rest now. Tomorrow will be hard. Today was hard.
Yes, and yesterday, and the day before.
She almost smiled.
But we're still here, still choosing. That's what matters.
As sleep finally took him, Caleb thought about choices and prices, about bridges that bore weight from both sides. He thought about Taki, standing tall in his last battle, about Nana, dying for the band despite his hatred, about little Ayana, alive because people had chosen to act. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human suffering and human courage alike. But beneath them, a remnant band held together, bound by loss and hope in equal measure. They'd paid in blood for another day of freedom. Tomorrow they'd likely pay again. But tonight, they were alive. They were together. And they were free. It was enough. It had to be. The fever took him 3 days after the battle. Caleb burned and shivered by turns, lost in dreams where dead men spoke to him in languages he didn't understand. Sometimes he was back in Georgia, watching flames consume a farmhouse. Sometimes he was in the canyon, reaching for Ayanna while bullets sang their deadly songs. Always, he was too late. Nayeli never left his side. When he thrashed, she held him down. When he called out names of men long dead, she spoke to him in Apache, the rhythm of the words more important than their meaning. When the fever peaked and his breathing turned shallow, she sang not death songs, but life songs, calling his spirit back from wherever it wandered. "He's dying," someone said on the 4th day. Caleb couldn't see who, could barely see anything through the haze of heat and pain. "No," Nayeli replied, fierce as a mountain cat. "He's fighting. There's a difference." She was right, somewhere beneath the fever. Caleb fought not to live, exactly, but to not leave her alone, to not break the promise implicit in their bound hands and mingled blood, to not be another ghost in her collection of losses. On the 5th day, the fever broke. He woke to find himself in a different shelter, larger than before, with actual walls instead of brush. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the logs, painting lines of gold across packed earth. "Welcome back," Grandmother Maria said, appearing in his field of vision with a bowl of something that smelled like herbs and life. "You gave us quite a scare." "Where?" "Safe, hidden, far from where Pike would think to look." She helped him sit up enough to drink. The liquid was bitter but warming. An old trading post, abandoned years ago. Karuk knew of it. The band. Healing, adapting, surviving. She studied him with those ancient eyes. "As are you. It seems... Nayeli said you would. Said you were too stubborn to die." "Where is she? Where do you think hunting with Karuk, gathering medicine, checking our back trail? That woman has done the work of 5 since you decided to dance with death." Grandmother Maria's expression softened slightly. "She'll be glad you're awake. She hasn't slept properly in days." As if summoned by the mention of her name, Nayeli appeared in the doorway. She looked thinner than before, shadows under her eyes. But when she saw him awake, something in her face eased. "You're back," she said simply. "Seems so." She crossed to him, knelt beside his blankets. Her hand found his forehead, checking for fever with the practiced touch of someone who'd been checking too often. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shot and dragged through the mountains." "Accurate." The ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Hungry?" "Yes." "Good. Grandmother Maria, could you—" "Already going," the old woman said, bustling out with a knowing look. When they were alone, Nayeli's composure cracked slightly. She bowed her head, and he saw her shoulders shake once, just once, before she regained control. "I thought I would lose you," she said quietly. "After everything, I thought—" She stopped, took a breath. "But you're too stubborn. I should have known." "Learned from the best." He managed. She looked at him then, really looked, and in her eyes he saw the toll the past days had taken, the weight of keeping him alive, keeping the band together, keeping hope when everything said to let it go. "The others blame me," she said. "Some of them. They say I brought a curse by choosing you, that the white man's trouble follows wherever you go." "They're not wrong." "They're not right, either." Her chin lifted in that way he'd come to recognize. "Trouble would have found us anyway. At least with you. We had another gun, another pair of eyes, another person willing to die for our children. I'm sorry you had to defend me. Sorry I wasn't. If you apologize one more time for not being invincible, I will hit you." She interrupted. "And you're too weak to defend yourself." That surprised a laugh out of him, which hurt but felt good too, like something loosening in his chest that had been twisted too long. "Tell me what I missed," he said. So she did. How they'd found this place, an old trading post abandoned when the routes changed, hidden in a box canyon that looked impassable unless you knew the trick of it. How they'd carried their wounded here, buried their dead along the way. How Karuk had taken leadership of what remained of the band. Maybe 15 souls all told.
"He's a good leader," Nayeli said. "Fair, smart. He listens to the women, values Grandmother Maria's counsel, and he doesn't blame you for what happened."
But others do. Some, they'll come around or they won't. We have bigger problems. Pike. Gone to ground. We think Karuk's been scouting. There are rumors he's in Fort Aldham, trying to hire more men. Says he's hunting renegades who attacked innocent traders. Her voice turned bitter.
"The army might even help him."
Caleb absorbed this, thinking through implications with a mind finally clear of fever. "We can't stay here." "No, but we can rest, plan, decide where running ends and fighting begins." Over the next days, as Caleb slowly regained strength, he watched the band remake itself. They were fewer now, but perhaps stronger for it, like metal refined in fire. The children adapted as children do, finding joy in small things despite recent terror. The women worked together with quiet efficiency, making their temporary shelter into something resembling home. The few remaining warriors patrolled and hunted, always watchful. And through it all, Nayeli moved like a force of nature, organizing, mediating, planning. She'd always been strong, but leadership had revealed new depths. When she spoke, people listened. When she decided, things happened. She was becoming what the band needed, even if she couldn't see it herself. One evening, as Caleb sat outside the shelter, finally able to walk short distances, Karuk joined him. They watched the sun paint the canyon walls red and gold, sharing comfortable silence. "She would make a good chief," Karuk said eventually. "Yes, but she won't accept it. Says she's too young, too female, too bound to a white man." He glanced at Caleb. "That last one could be fixed. You offering to shoot me. I'm offering to let you walk away, cleanly, with supplies and our gratitude." Karuk's voice was carefully neutral. It might be easier, for everyone. Caleb considered it. Not for the first time. He wondered if his presence brought more harm than help. But then he remembered a silver dollar. A knife passed back and forth. Blood willingly mingled. "Can't," he said simply. "We're bound, her fate and mine. Bonds can be broken."
"Not this one. Not by me."
Karuk nodded as if he'd expected that answer. "Then we adapt, as we've always done." He stood to go, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad she has you, and that we have you. Taki saw something that day in the circle. I'm beginning to see it too." That night, Nayeli found Caleb trying to clean his rifle with hands that still shook slightly. She took it from him without asking, began the work herself. "Karuk says you refused his offer," she said, not looking up.
"You heard? I hear everything that matters."
She worked the action, checking for damage. "You could have gone, started fresh somewhere. No one would have blamed you." "You would have." "No, I would have understood. We bring you nothing but trouble." "Funny, I was thinking the same about me." She did look up then. "We're a matched pair of troubles, then." "Seems so." They worked together in companionable silence, her cleaning while he sorted ammunition. The simple domesticity of it felt strange after so much violence, but good too, like a promise that life contained more than running and fighting. "I've been thinking," Nayeli said eventually, "about what comes next. We can't run forever. Pike won't stop, and others like him will come. The army sees us as hostiles. The settlers want our land. We need something different." "What kind of different?"
"I don't know yet,
but staying as we are means dying slowly. Taki knew it. I think that's why he chose to stand better to die with purpose than fade away. She set the rifle aside, met his eyes. We need to find another way. Not just Apache way or white way, but something new, something that lets us live free without always looking over our shoulders. It was a big thought, maybe impossible. But Caleb had seen impossible things happen, $1 buying freedom, enemies becoming family, bridges built from blood and choice. Whatever you decide, he said, I'm with you. I know. She smiled then, full and real. That's why it might work, because we're already proof that different peoples can choose to stand together. Now we just need to convince the rest of the world. Outside, night was falling over their hidden canyon. Soon Kuruk would set the watches. Grandmother Maria would tell stories to the children, and the band would settle into uneasy rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: hunting, scouting, the endless work of survival. But tonight, Caleb sat with the woman who'd saved his life in more ways than one, and they dreamed of a future where running wasn't the only choice, where bridges bore weight but didn't break, where $1 spent in hope could buy more than anyone imagined. The stars emerged one by one, ancient witnesses to human struggle, under their light. An Apache woman and a former soldier cleaned weapons and made plans, bound together by choice and necessity and something that might have been love. It wasn't safety, it wasn't peace, but it was possibility. And sometimes that was enough to build a life on. Sometimes it was everything. The letter lay unfinished for 3 days before Caleb found the words. He sat in the doorway of their small adobe house, watching Nayeli work with the children in the garden they'd planted. 5 years had passed since that night in Dust Creek. 5 years of running, fighting, building, and finally, this. Asterisk, dear mother, he wrote, though she'd been dead near 8 years now. Asterisk, I know you cannot read this, but I need to tell someone who might understand. The settlement had no official name, on maps, if it appeared at all. It might be marked as Agua Dulce for the sweet spring that bubbled year-round. But those who lived here, Apache, Mexican, white, and mixed, just called it home. 40 souls now, maybe more, not hiding anymore, but not advertising either. Asterisk, you asked me once what I was fighting for in the war. I gave you grand words about union and freedom, but I think now I was fighting because everyone else was, because it seemed like the thing to do. I killed for ideas I didn't understand and came home to find those ideas hadn't saved anyone. Little Ayana ran past, chasing a chicken, her laughter bright as water. She was 10 now, speaking 3 languages and afraid of nothing. Caleb had taught her to read using his mother's old Bible, the only book he'd kept through everything. She called him uncle in Apache, a word that meant more than blood relation. Asterisk, but mother, I finally understand. Freedom isn't just the absence of chains. It's not just walking where you want or saying what you think. Real freedom is the right to choose who you stand with, who you protect, who you love. It's building something worth defending, not because anyone orders you to, but because your heart won't let you do otherwise. Nayeli looked up from where she was showing young Marcus a settler's orphan they'd taken in How to Coax Life from Desert Soil. Her hair had grown long again, streaked now with early silver from the weight of the years. When she smiled at Caleb across the garden, he saw in her face all their shared yesterdays and unspoken tomorrows. Asterisk, I spent my last $1 on an Apache woman. Not to buy her, you can't buy people. Though the world keeps trying, I spent it to give her a choice. And she chose to give me one in return. We chose each other, again and again, through blood and bullets and the long, hard work of daily living. The sound of horses brought Caleb's head up, old instincts never quite fading. But it was just Kuruk returning from the trading post, wagon loaded with supplies. He waved, and Caleb relaxed. They'd fought Pike one last time, 2 years back. The man had come with hired guns and hate, but found a united settlement ready to defend itself. He'd died in the dust, still clutching his bill of sale. still not understanding that some things couldn't be owned. Asterisk. We have a place now, not Apache land or white land, but something new. The Mexican government tolerates us because we keep the peace. The Apache bands trade with us because we're fair. The settlers stop here for water and supplies and find themselves staying because we protect all equally. Even a use. Marshall came through last month. He said he was looking for renegades. We fed him, and he rode on, finding none here. Grandmother Maria emerged from the healing house, instructing her apprentices in the art of medicine. She moved slower these days, but her mind was sharp as ever. She'd delivered 7 babies in their settlement, each one a small victory against those who said different peoples couldn't live together. Asterisk, I know you worried about me after the war. Worried I'd lost my way, my purpose, and you were right, I had. But sometimes being lost is the only way to find a path nobody else has walked. Sometimes you have to spend your last dollar on hope and see what grows from that seedling of faith. The sun was setting, painting their small valley in shades of gold and rose. Soon the evening meal would bring everyone together: Apache stew and Mexican tortillas, preserved peaches from a settler's recipe, all of it shared without thought of whose tradition it came from. Asterisk, you taught me that love was sacrifice, and that's true. But Nayeli taught me that love is also choice. Every day, we choose to wake up together, to build together, to face whatever comes together. Not because we have to, but because we can't imagine it any other way. Uncle Caleb, Ayanna called. Come see the beans are sprouting. He set down his pencil, the letter almost complete. As he stood, his side twinged, the old wound acting up as it did sometimes. But Nayeli was there, steady as always, her hand finding his. Good news, she asked, nodding at the letter. Just telling my mother about you, about us, about all of this. What do you tell her? That her son finally learned what freedom means. They walked together toward the garden where children of 3 cultures knelt in the same soil, marveling at the simple miracle of green shoots pushing through earth. Karuk was unloading supplies while his wife Sarah, a schoolteacher from back east, who'd come seeking adventure and found family, organized the goods. Former enemies worked side by side, bound not by law or force, but by choice and shared tomorrows. I'll end this letter now, Mother, though I'll never send it. But if somehow you can see what's become of your wandering boy, I hope you'd be proud. I found my war's worth fighting not for grand ideas or distant governments, but for the right of people to choose their own bonds, make their own families, build their own peace. Asterisk, your son, who spent his last dollar and gained the world. Asterisk, Caleb Thorne, asterisk. That night, as the settlement gathered for the evening meal, Caleb tucked the letter into the wooden box where he kept his few treasures: his mother's Bible, the Confederate soldier's knife, a silver dollar Nayeli had given him on their first anniversary, saying it was important to always have one last dollar to spend on hope. Around the fire, Grandmother Maria was telling the story again, as she did for every new arrival, how a soldier spent his last coin to free a woman who taught him freedom's true meaning, how they chose each other against all odds, how that choice grew into this, a place where Apache and white, Mexican and mixed could live not in mere tolerance, but in chosen kinship. The children listened with wide eyes, though they'd heard it 12 times, because some stories needed retelling, needed to become legend, needed to remind people that the world could be different than it was. When the tale ended, Caleb felt Nayeli's hand slip into his, around them. Their chosen family settled into evening routines. Tomorrow would bring its challenges: crops to tend, trades to make, the endless work of maintaining peace in a violent world. But tonight, they were all here, all safe, all free. No regrets, Nayeli asked quietly, echoing a question from years past. None, Caleb replied, meaning it. You. Only one, she smiled. That you had only $1 to spend that night. Imagine if you'd had 2. He laughed, pulling her close. Then I'd have bought you twice. Fool, she said fondly.
You still don't understand. You never bought me at all. You bought us the chance to choose. Everything else, we built ourselves.
Under the vast desert stars, surrounded by the living proof that different peoples could choose to be one people, Caleb understood perfectly. Some investments paid dividends beyond measuring. Some choices echoed through generations. And sometimes, just sometimes, the last dollar in your pocket could purchase a future nobody dared dream. The fire burned low. The settlement slept. And in the morning, the sun would rise on free people living free lives, bound by neither law nor blood, but by something stronger, the daily choice to stand together, to build together, to face whatever came together. It was more than Caleb had dared hope for when he'd set that silver dollar on a saloon table. It was more than Nayeli had imagined when she'd taken a knife from strangers' hands. But it was theirs, earned in blood and trust, and the long patient work of proving that love could bridge any divide. The last dollar had been well spent indeed. Thank you so much for listening to this story of hope, choice, and the true meaning of freedom in the Old West. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this tale meant to you. If you enjoyed this journey with Caleb and Nayeli, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850, give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more people discover this story of how one silver dollar changed everything. Until next time, keep riding toward your own horizons.